Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Monday, March 11th, 2024. Yes, still having difficulty with that one. So 2024. It is Monday. It's daylight savings time. Maybe that has something to do with it. Everybody is a little bit off, I guess, or at least everybody wants to say they're a little bit off. It doesn't usually present that much of a problem to me, but I don't know. It's a little disorienting today. It's really cold and very windy, and like winter came back all of a sudden. I think it might even have snowed a little bit last night, and I wasn't really expecting it. And then, of course, just to shock you and further damage your health, well-being, skin, what have you, it's going to be in the 70s in the middle of the week around here, but it's like 20-something in the morning at the moment, and cold and windy. And therefore intruding into our soundproof studio here. Okay, lots to round up for the weekend. It was Oscars night, which, of course, as you know, as longtime listeners, means I don't know what happened. It seeps through in social media. Oppenheimer, I guess, Best Picture. Other than that, I don't know. Probably all the expected winners. I didn't see people screaming about controversy or somebody that won that shouldn't have won, or somebody that didn't get recognized that should have. Although I did see that they gave Mel Brooks an award at some point, but they did it during the pre-broadcast, like afternoon Oscars that nobody gets to watch or something, which seems like a bit of a travesty. But what can I tell you? It doesn't really seep into my view, but neither does the State of the Union address, so you shouldn't feel bad about that, Oscars. It's not me snubbing you because I am too important for movies or anything. It's just there should be like a cable awards. These Academy Award winning pictures get their awards once they come on cable, and I can see them. Although now they've blurred the line between that and theatrical release, and now you can sometimes pay to watch it at home, but that doesn't count for me. I need to be able to flip by on the channels and accidentally see it. That's how I see most of my movies. All right. Well, at any rate, there was also, of course, reaction to the State of the Union. Everyone was right in instantly pointing out that, what's her name? Katie Britt. That Katie Britt's response to the State of the Union was going to be fodder for Saturday Night Live. It was pretty easy to spot, and the interesting thing was I was the only one in the house who had seen any part of the Katie Britt response. And, of course, I had only seen that because people were circulating clips of it on the internet. And then when we watched the SNL spoof of it at home, it was difficult to explain that it was actually, I thought, a little less wacky than the actual one. It was Scarlett Johansson played Katie Britt, and she didn't really do the crazy stuff. She's, I guess, too good of an actress, or couldn't convince herself to do the bad acting. I don't know. She did a pretty good job with it, but the original is still pretty wacky, and there's really no conveying just how creepy and strange it actually is without seeing it. So anyway, that happened, and then she spent the weekend on the Sunday talk shows, apparently, defending herself. And by the way, a TikTok video blogger type guy, I don't know how to describe people anymore. I say he's a TikToker, which he is, but if it makes you think that he was doing a Korean pop dance on TikTok, no, he was explaining that the big tearjerker story, I mean, she cried from it anyway, that Katie Britt, every time I say Katie Britt, I think I'm like, am I referring, it's just like some shorthand way of referring to what's her, Middleton, Kate Middleton. No, she's a Brit, but she's not Katie Britt. That's the other one, but who's also in the news. Don't ask me how. I found out last night. I asked. Anyway, the Katie Britt thing, she spent the weekend defending the tearjerker story, which was I mean, it's a terrible story, but of course she told it terribly. Apparently the whole story about I went to the border, already, you know, something's going to happen. She's about to lie. She just said she went to the border and she met with a woman who had been a victim of sex trafficking. And then I think you probably know the story by now. She implies essentially that this sex trafficking had happened at the hands of cartels who smuggle people over the border from Mexico for this purpose, and that Joe Biden, in his open border policy, had allowed this. And even, you know, I'm sure at some point you're supposed to understand that not only had he allowed it, he had encouraged it, and maybe he even went there himself and abused women. Who knows? But she was trying to pin the whole thing on him. Anyway, the TikToker tracked the whole thing down, did this amazing explanation of what she had said, what made him suspicious, what sources he went to try to find out. Anyway, the whole thing collapsed in a 7-minute exposition of his investigative reporting, which, you know, by the way, it tells you also probably a professional reporter could have done this. It didn't take him 7 minutes to do the whole job. It took him 7 minutes to explain it. But, yes, it did happen. It's a real story, but it happened between 2004 and 2008, at which point, of course, Joe Biden wasn't even vice president yet. It was George W. Bush's administration. It happened in Mexico, not in the United States. It didn't happen in the border region. It happened deep inside Mexico. It was not drug cartels that was trafficking her. And, I mean, every piece of this story was wrong, but she went on the Sunday shows to defend herself and basically said, well, I was very clear about it. I said that I met a woman who told me about how she had been sex trafficked when she was 12. So obviously that's in the past. Well, what about all the rest of it? U.S., Mexico, cartels, no cartels, Joe Biden's connection to it. Got nothing to say about that. Anyway, the whole story collapsed. She's a big liar. And of course, she's now being touted for vice president because, as you know, Katie Britt, who I just learned was a senator the other day when she was selected to give this stupid response to the State of the Union. Katie Britt has been in the Senate for 15 seconds, and she has effed up 14 out of the 15 with this ridiculous story. But of course, Republicans, always prone to terminal Dan Snyder disease, the minute a new shiny object appears, and it looks like it's an object they might want to objectify, see Sarah Palin, what have you, they say, oh, here's our vice presidential candidate. And it's, honest to God, you guys want to do the Sarah Palin thing again? I guess I invite you to do it. The door's wide open. And no less a figure than Mitt Romney, actually, apparently out there on social media saying, the reason the Democrats were attacking Katie Britt so viciously, i.e. pointing out you used a national forum that was handed to you for nothing to lie viciously about somebody who had nothing to do with the story you were telling. But Mitt Romney said the reason that the Democrats are doing this is, of course, they're scared of her. She's the vice presidential candidate that most frightens them. And, I mean, I don't know where Mitt Romney's head is these days. I'm glad he's or he thinks he's anti-Trump, but he's already discussing who should be his vice president. I don't know how anti-Trump he is anymore. And secondly, yeah, this idea that this person should be on the ticket when yesterday nobody even knew she was a senator. That's crazy. Well, it's the least crazy of all the things that they endorse on a day-to-day basis. Greg Dworkin has a collection of those stories. And let's welcome him to the program because he's here and you know it. You hear him. So, hi. Good morning, Greg.
Well, good morning. How are you?
I'm okay.
Hey, let's start with Jimmy Kimmel.
All right. Yes. He was on this Oscars program, I understand.
He was hosting it. And I've got a 1 minute and 26 second video. Oh. I've got a different video. It's at the very bottom of the list I sent you.
Okay. Let me see how I can engineer that. I'll have to get on the other computer. But
yeah, while you do that,
let me think
let me just set it up for you.
Okay.
So Kimmel is hosting, and then he gets out there and he basically says, you know, they gave me an extra minute, and while we're doing that, let's just look up some reviews. So he takes out his iPhone and he scrolls, and he finds Donald Trump's Truth Social comment about the Oscars, talking about him, Jimmy Kimmel.
in real time.
In real time.
Okay.
So let's see if you can set up that video and play
Where's
it.
my chats? Here we go. There's you. All right. And you said, why did it put it down? All right. Here's what I'll do. The other computer displays things differently and more easily, unless they've updated something, and I don't know anything about it. So you say you put it down at the bottom of this video?
Yeah.
Is it the...
It's right after play the video.
Oh.
In a
There it
screen
is.
cap of the Trump
okay.
tweet.
Yes. All right. Let's see. One, I will pocket that, and then I can open the pocket on the other computer. I don't know. It's just...
Does it work when you do that?
Yeah, sometimes. Let's see. All right. So let's see. It's a Twitter video embedded. Is that right? Okay. I'm in the right place. Okay. Now, then I'll have to fiddle with the volume. You know, there's a lot that goes into not knowing what the hell you're doing.
Put a quarter in the back of the computer.
Okay. All right. There's Jimmy Kimmel. Oh, look at that. He looks like he's in 1970 something with that tux. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. We're cued. 126.
Play
yes.
it.
Oh, all right.
Everyone.
There he is.
I was just, this doing this show is not about me, and I appreciate you having me. It's really about you and Emma and all these great actors and actresses and filmmakers. But I was told we have like an extra minute, and I'm really proud of something. I was wondering if I could share it with you. I just got a review, and
Okay.
has
Here
there
we
ever
go.
been a worse host than Jimmy Kimmel at the Oscars? His opening was that of a less than average person trying too hard to be something which he is not and never can be. Get rid of Kimmel and perhaps replace him with another washed up but cheap ABC talent, George Slopanopoulos. He would make everybody on stage look bigger, stronger, and more glamorous. Blah, blah, blah. Make America great again. Okay, now. See if you can guess which former president just posted that on Tuesday.
Okay.
Anyone? No? Well, thank you, President Trump. Thank you for watching. I'm surprised you're still... Isn't it past your jail time?
And that's it.
Okay.
And so he handled that with aplomb.
Yes.
Just a technical note, those of you listening at home don't have to pay attention to this, but just under that is a shorter video I also want to play, but a little bit later.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Oscars. I don't know if I credit ABC or else. YouTube is going to go crazy that I used a minute of somebody else's footage. But okay, we heard it. That's all we care about.
Right. Other things, and it's 7 minutes. I'm not going to ask you to play
Oh,
it, but
well,
yeah, I
my
do
God.
have it for the links for later.
Oh,
And there's
start
a
working
fellow
on that
named
one.
Jonathan Katz. Katz on Earth is on
yeah,
TikTok. He's the
that's the
7-minute expose of Katie Britt. He's an
Yes.
XAP reporter, so
Oh,
he is a
okay.
professional.
Excellent. Well, no wonder he did so well with it. I guess, okay, so that undermines the story of, I thought it was a amateur person who had done the work of a investigative reporter. And
No, he's
how
a
come you guys
freelancer
didn't
now.
find it? But he
But
actually
he's
is
got a
one.
professional background.
All right. Well, it was a good explanation. So if he was amateur, he should go pro.
Yeah, he's a vlogger, so
He is now.
he is now.
A
So there's that.
TikToker.
I have a lot. I had that in the Friday Pundit Roundup. The speech was Thursday. And, of course, there's a lot to say about the speech, including the fact that Biden raised $10 million the next day, which ain't pocket change. So, I mean, Trump can't afford it.
Yeah. Well, if he raises
had
$10 million,
to,
he has to
he
put
had
it up
to
in his
sell
bond.
out again to get a bond to, cover the E. Jean Carroll stuff. And we haven't even
did get it.
approaching the fraud on your business, $450 million that he has to cover.
The bond he got is 1/5 of the bond he needs to come up with for the fraud
Right.
case.
So, he's in the tank for whoever paid him. And, whether it was
Yeah.
Elon Musk or whether it was the Chubb Group, we just don't know. But that's really the whole point. When you owe that kind of money and you don't know who's funding the bill, it makes you vulnerable. And so people should never vote for somebody like that because he's a security risk. I mean,
Well,
what if it's Russia? And that's not just making it up. It could be. Who knows?
Yeah. It is.
They
It's
have that
enormous
kind of money.
risk.
Trump doesn't have that kind of money.
Yeah. Tremendous. What are they? What did Eric once say about a tremendous portion of their funding coming from Russia?
Right. We don't have to worry about the American banks.
No.
We get it from the Russians.
Right.
So as far as Katie Britt goes, yeah, she was worse than awful. And people have to understand what the State of the Union is. I'm guessing you didn't watch it. You don't tend to watch those things.
Right. Oh, yeah, you weren't here for me to say I didn't watch it yet. That's
no,
right.
but I know you.
Yeah. It's 12 years of not watching it, or more than that.
12 years of not watching speeches.
I watched
I figured
Trump
you didn't watch
ones.
this one either, except you probably saw snippets of it.
Right, exactly. That's how I consume this stuff. And probably most people, to the extent that they consume it, do get it that way.
So I saw the whole thing because that's what I do.
Yeah.
And I saw the whole Katie Britt
Sucker.
thing. And the shocking difference was commented on, let's just say. So Biden gets up there, and again, to set the scene, he has
States House of
a
Representatives.
very good speech. As Jonathan Last has pointed out, he has a piece, Biden, period, can, period, win, period.
Okay.
Were you surprised at Brandon? You shouldn't have been. Last year, Joe Biden gave a banger of a State of the Union. After October 7th, he gave two powerful addresses. On January 5th, 2024, he delivered an excellent speech about American democracy. He is good at this.
Yeah,
and so he gave a very, very good speech. And the point is, Republicans, for whatever reason, and they do this every year, set the bar so low that winning for Biden was getting through the speech without dying.
Yeah, well, that was the way it was for Trump. Yeah,
which he did. And so it was more than good. But at the same time, there were polls. And I think the major one was CNN, which was right after. And yes, it's a snap poll. But, there are points of that are still worth mentioning. And one of them is that CNN actually looked at the partisan breakup of who was watching.
Okay.
Right? Typically, it's like 45% whatever party's in power and 35% whoever's not in power, just to see if, they make some major flub they could use.
Okay.
And 20% indies. This one was like 33, close to it anyway.
Oh, okay.
So there were more
Sure, why
Republicans and more independents watching, especially, than you would have expected.
Okay.
All right. So people saw it, is what I'm trying to say. And then they go tell their friends, and that's how this stuff, gets around. And of those who saw it, 17% thought that Biden, did better on issues than before.
17?
He went up 17%.
Oh, okay. All right. So that's not
pre-post.
All right. I got you now. That's not the total of the people who thought he did a good job. Hey, that's bad.
No.
17%.
It was in the 60s.
Improvement.
63% liked it.
Okay.
All right. That's lower than previous years. Well, that's because there's less partisans than previous years.
Okay.
And so to say, well, less people liking it means it really didn't have an impact. No, you don't understand what these things are. Most people treat the State of the Union like David. They only hear about it afterwards.
I didn't even understand.
That's even more true for the response, but it's true for the State of the Union as well. And so the vibe is that, hey, he did pretty good. I guess he's not seen all. That's all it was needed.
Yeah, that's true. They did succeed in making it easy to have a win. That was a huge Republican mistake, but
right, and a win it was.
Cool.
So that's why Biden raised $10 million the next day.
Oh, all right.
E.J. Dionne says Biden hoped to be a peacemaker. Now he knows he must be a warrior. In other words, it was the speech I wanted, and it was great because this speech is for the partisans. It's supposed to fire him up. It did.
Okay. Well, that's good.
So it was a success by things that you measure State of the Unions by. Taking it to the next level, however, was the response.
Oh, yeah.
So Katie Britt, an unknown first-term senator.
Totally unknown. I mean,
unknown.
I had no idea.
Who was in the running with Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance to be vice president, according to a leak from Trump camp, which means nothing. Because leaks from them mean nothing.
I get you.
But it's flattering. Keep them in the camp, etc. Pit them against each other. I'll say something good again about that upstate New Yorker, whose name I like to forget, Elise Stefanik. And of course he's probably going to pick Kristi Noem in the end because what he wants is somebody photogenic on TV, and that's all he cares about.
Yeah. Although I do have a hard time seeing him settle on a woman candidate.
Well,
Although,
by the
he
time he
drags
picks
them
one,
around
he'll
with
be
him.
losing, so he'll feel like he needs one. And as far as
Maybe.
picking a woman candidate,
Yeah.
why did he have Katie Britt do this?
I don't know. Did he select her?
Oh,
I mean, maybe.
He
I don't
selects
know.
everything.
I guess so.
He's got veto power over everything.
yeah, he's
Look
just doing a
what's
pageant
going on in
thing.
Congress.
He does want the telegenic thing when he wants somebody on screen talking about how great he is and how terrible Joe
Right.
Biden is. I
So-
don't know whether
so-
he would really make one vice president. Though.
So this is
one of
where
those people.
the other video I wanted you to play comes in.
Oh, okay. Oh, really? All right. Let's
Yeah.
see.
It's just below the other one in my list.
Okay. Oh, I switched over. All right. And so was this the 7-minute one? But you only want a piece of it?
No. This
okay.
is the 52-second.
Oh, okay. Let's see. From Piper 4.
Yes,
there we go.
that's the one.
All right, Piper 4. Hold on a second. We'll cue you up.
So while you're doing that, see the
Yes,
point
you
there
talk it up, and I'll...
is that there are actual videos of Katie Britt before the speech checking things out. It's in an empty
yeah?
kitchen. People
Oh.
make fun of that. She's in the
It
kitchen.
was
They
kind
didn't
of
show her feet, so you don't know if she's barefoot, but that's part of the
okay.
attraction.
I don't know if she has feet. She has them.
That's deliberate.
Probably. Maybe.
Okay. And so the way she delivers it, as you pointed out, even Scarlett
Okay,
Johansson
there we
couldn't give it the bizarreness it needed.
All right.
What
I got
it needed is the music from Sally Struthers or one of those other, Save the Children, Save the Animals.
Oh, boy.
And somebody had put that up, and it's just fantastic because it totally matches.
All right. Let's see. We got this one here.
But she was doing something different.
Okay.
Can you play it?
Yeah, I think so. Let's see. Is this the right one? Jess Piper. Yeah, okay. Here we go. Let's see.
To be a school teacher, and I love that. But I
Is that who we're talking?
felt burdened for so many people, and I felt the calling to go back to school to become a Christian counselor.
That is Kelly Johnson. She is married to our
Kelly
new Christian
Johnson.
nationalist
Okay.
Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. I heard that voice, and I was like, I know who she is, and y'all do too.
Well, I would think that I would encourage my girls if they struggle
Oh, Michelle
with
Duggar?
an eating disorder
Yes.
to just be open
Listen
and
to the
honest.
voice.
Yeah.
Michelle Duggar. You heard it too, right? I was born and raised an evangelical, a fundamentalist. That is called the fundie baby voice. It means you're submissive. It means you're a good woman. It means you're kind and you support your husband. And the better you are at the baby voice, the better woman you are. And of course, Mike Johnson's wife uses the fundie baby voice. And I'm absolutely positive the new Speaker of the House would like all of us women to use our fundie baby voices.
That's interesting.
It's very interesting. And so basically
Weird.
that's what Katie Britt was doing.
Okay.
And the
It's
reason
weird
like
when we have to
normies
find out
looked
they
at
have
this and started vomiting is
signals.
because we're not into the fundie baby voice.
We don't even
And
know
so
what it is.
there was somebody from the Trump camp who said this was a deliberate choice, and she did great because they hit their target audience.
Well,
But
she
this
certainly
goes back to the whole concept that the target audience is not big enough to win elections. So
Right.
what the
They're
heck
not
are they
old enough
doing?
to vote? Apparently. Yeah, that's a good. Well, that's a weird thing. It's very interesting whenever we find out when they're using code, and it's usually just the weird words and weird word drops or phrase drops, and it makes sense to them and not to the normies. But now the voice thing, that is interesting. I mean, it's no surprise that they would be choosing a fundamentalist evangelical to do the response, and it was given away by the very prominent cross necklace as well. But the voice thing, that's an interesting clue. All right, I guess
that
we'll be
plus
hearing
the
it like
kitchen.
the Wilhelm scream.
None of that was coincidence. That was planned.
Yeah, the kitchen thing. I figured that was also code, and it's also was easy to recognize as. The excuse could be, well, this is, as they tried to say, we make our decisions around the kitchen table like regular Americans, like this kitchen table here that just came out of the box and has never been used before.
Right, exactly.
Or whatever. Okay. Yeah. All right. Baby fundie voice. Learn something new every 15 minutes on this show.
Kyle Whitmire is a 2023 Pulitzer Prize winning columnist from Alabama, AL.com.
Okay.
And he writes, Britt blamed Biden for assault that happened during Bush administration in Mexico. Yeah. Of course, the whole thing Jonathan Katz, and he gives Jonathan Katz credit here, is point out that this happened, but it happened circa 2008, somewhere around there. And in other words, George Bush was still president, had nothing to do with Biden whatsoever, and all the insinuations. It happened in Mexico, too. It didn't happen in the U.S. So all the insinuations that this was a border problem that Biden created was complete. You ready? You're complete and total bullshit.
But okay. No,
she deliberately lied. She got caught in that lie, and that's what the whole next 3 days was talking about, as they should.
Oh, wait a second.
And she tried to make up for it and said, well, it was parable, it was this and that. The lady said, Katie Britt never interviewed me personally about this.
Oh. That's interesting. Yeah, she's now speaking. I mean, she's an activist, and she's an activist frequently available for that.
How stupid can you be to misrepresent the story of an activist as if they don't know what a microphone is and can't find one?
Yeah, she's a public speaker. That's how the whole thing got set up. I did see that
in front of Congress.
Yeah, she's done that, and
2015, I think.
And she gave a whole that's true. I saw that, and I also have seen her commenting like, I'm an activist and I do this. I tell people the story because it's important for them to know. But she says I'm really wary of telling my story to politicians because I know exactly what they're going to do with the story, and it really bothers me that they exploit it. Like my story is that I was just terribly exploited, and then they go and exploit me.
And now you're explaining me, and you're a liar. And so no, none of this works in Katie Britt's benefit or the GOP, even though it so-called obscures Biden's State of the Union. No. Each did what it was supposed to.
Yeah. And everybody got to laugh at the other one.
Well, that's what it's supposed to.
Yeah, well, that's true, too. It fulfilled that role as well.
Whoever does it, and
there's no way, no one has ever done it well. I just don't think it's possible.
Bobby Jindal, Marco Rubio.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. Oh, wait a minute. This one is this one didn't pocket yet. I have to rearrange this. We're back, and over the break, Greg was showing me. Oops, I got to get rid of some of these other video or audio inputs. But he shared with me another clip of Katie Britt herself, and the joke of this one is visual, so I guess, I don't know, I guess I could describe it, but we won't be able to. But basically, this is to be a refresher for you who just learned about the baby fundie voice, about what Katie Britt's voice is actually like. But what has happened here is, do you remember when we were talking about her speech on Friday, and I said she's got this wacky green shirt on, and when they were going to put her on SNL, if they used the actual video, or they used a green screen to recreate the kitchen behind whoever they had playing her, that it would end up looking like her head was floating bodiless above, the floor of the kitchen. Someone took advantage of this, the fact that she was wearing a green screen colored shirt, and then used it as a green screen. Hal Sparks, I guess, is the person behind it, who then
Hal
guess,
Sparks says, "Look, I'm not just cute. I'm useful."
Okay, and used the Katie Britt's shirt as a screen to project various images on while she's talking. But so you will get to hear the baby fundie voice,
the honor of serving the people of
along
the
with a little
great
music
state of Alabama and the United States Senate. However, it's not the job that matters most. I am a
You get the
proud
idea.
wife and mom of 2 school-aged kids.
Anyway, so he's projecting that. Let's see, the Dark Brandon cartoon was on her shirt. There's a Trump in a clown makeup. There's Jeffrey Epstein. There's a Jeffrey Epstein on there. I missed
several times,
along with Trump.
My daughter Bennett and my son Ridgway.
It's
listen to her voice.
For the Senate. I'm worried about their future.
There's Hal Sparks, just sort of agape.
Just
it's
to
funny.
Give you an idea of what the voice. But now that you know it's a baby fundie voice, you sort of get the tone and how it sounds so different than her actual speaking voice.
Oh, does it? That's interesting. I've never heard that. So.
Well, there's a clip of her speaking beforehand, just setting it up. How'd I do? Oh, look, I'm just going to do this here. She's rehearsing. And it's a regular voice.
How do I look on camera?
The baby fundie voice when she does the actual speech.
That is interesting. That's gross and weird. So
yes,
thank you for telling me about it.
And that's why I'm telling you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm trying it out myself. You're all right.
Welcome.
Fundamentalists are going to start listening to this show.
I don't think that this is something that people should do.
Guess not. But we have to get one of those little voice synthesizer things that can pick me up a couple registers. So
yeah, I got one of those.
Oh, all right, cool. I'm gonna get it. All right, and we'll put it on. Yes.
So that's what that happened. And yes, people are still going to be talking about it, but those are the contexts in which people are going to be talking about it. Nobody's going to remember a specific line from the State of the Union speech. What they'll remember is Biden was energetic, that he did a double take when he saw the way Marjorie Taylor Greene was dressed. He mixed it up with Republicans and got them to back into a corner on Social Security and Medicare cuts like he always does because they set themselves up for it every year. That's what they're going to remember about that. And that, Democrats liked it. What they're going to remember about Katie Britt is everything we talked about today. That's bad for them because when you expose the fact that MAGA is really white Christian fundamentalism, and it is. Then that's off-putting. And Trump is great at getting the vote out. It's just that what he's great at is getting Democratic votes out. And this is why. Excellent. And so you combine this with IVF, not IDF, but IVF, and Dobbs, and you got yourself a motivator here.
Well, that's great.
Yes, isn't it?
Bless your heart.
Yeah, Church Lady needs to come on and from SNL as well.
Yeah, who did not use
Dana
it. She wasn't
convincing
baby.
Do something. But Scarlett Johansson was great. Meanwhile, of course, we did cover this, but Dean Phillips on Super Tuesday last week when he lost did concede, and he wrote a long, gracious concession that didn't make up for the fact that he was being a jerk for months.
Oh.
But Drew Janda on Twitter found the best Dean Phillips concession speech there ever was. It goes like this. The haters said I couldn't do it. And they were correct. Honestly, great call from the haters.
All right.
That would have been the speech.
Oh, yeah, well, that would have been a good one. I would have voted for that, except not for president.
That would have been a great concession speech, and he should have done it. Meanwhile, what is Donald Trump actually doing? He tried to answer the State of the Union speech with Truth Social, but it crashed, so he couldn't.
Oh, yeah. I heard about that. He was going to live tweet or whatever you would call it.
No, he didn't compete with it. He talked about it yesterday, but nobody cares. He did meet with Viktor Orban. Maybe that's where the money's coming from, not directly from Russia, but indirectly from Russia via Hungary. So Jim Sciutto from CNN has this short how short is it? It's eight tweets.
Oh, okay. It's on another video clip.
It's a thread.
All right.
Which I'll read to you. And he says this morning, new to Donald Trump, Hungarian strongman Viktor Orban is fantastic. Chinese leader Xi Jinping is brilliant. North Korea's Kim Jong-un is an okay guy. And most alarmingly, he allegedly said Adolf Hitler did some good things. Former senior advisors recalled to me, Jim Sciutto, It's a worldview that would reverse decades-old U.S. foreign policy in a second term should he win November's presidential election, an assessment laid out in The Return of Great Powers, which is out tomorrow. Full story here.
Oh.
And this is today, so it's not out today. It's out tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
He thought Putin was an okay guy and Kim was an okay guy, that we had pushed North Korea in a corner. Retired General John Kelly, Trump's former chief of staff, said to him, it's like we were goading these guys. If we didn't have NATO, Putin wouldn't be doing these things. And this is from a whole write-up on CNN, which is entitled Former Advisors Sound the Alarm on Trump. So, he's giving us an idea what's going on. And there's actually been some discussion in the media about the fact that, maybe we are just getting too jaded and too cynical. And it's old news that Trump is like erratic and crazy and stuff like that. And we're not really covering it the way we should. Maybe we should cover it more. And that would be okay.
I'd be all right with that.
Shooter goes on to say, Trump allegedly reserved some of his most unnerving praise for Hitler. He said, well, Hitler did some good things. And I said, what? And he said, well, Hitler rebuilt the economy, but he turned it against his own people and against the world. This is John Kelly recalling all of this. It's pretty hard to believe he missed the Holocaust, though, and pretty hard to understand how he missed the 400,000 American GIs that were killed in the European theater, Kelly told me. But I think it's more, again, the tough guy thing.
Yeah.
He views himself as a big guy. He likes dealing with other big guys like Erdogan and Turkey get to put people in jail, and remember, you get to kill drug dealers like they do in the Philippines. Trump campaign spokesman Stephen Chung did not comment on the substance, but said John Kelly and John Bolton have completely beclowned themselves and are suffering from a severe case of Trump derangement syndrome. They need to seek professional help because their hatred is consuming their empty lives. So that's basically how it stands. And, he said, she said, this is their response, simply does not do justice to the story. And that's why media is effing it up every single day, just about every single time they possibly can. It's such a huge story, and they're just not covering it the way that they ought to, although I did see it start to make its way onto the headlines of the papers of record.
Okay. Well,
and of course, CNN is doing this, which is why I'm telling you. So it's not fair to say, well, they don't cover it at all. They do. They give it a 10-minute treatment, then they don't go back to it. Whereas, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Biden is old. And if you haven't heard it today, you heard it yesterday. If you didn't hear it yesterday, you heard it the day before. You're not going to hear it as much because of that State of the Union. And that's what that does. And the other thing that State of the Union does is it neuters, it vaccinates against, it protects from the Republican line. Well, you see now, you can't vote for a drooling old man. Yeah, did you see the State of the Union? I'll show you 30 seconds of it.
Yes.
That's not a doddering old man. That's him taking on the Republicans and besting them right there in front of their own noses. That's Mike Johnson trying to crawl under his chair because he knows what's going on here.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad they're finally, that the press is, getting a clue is nice.
I'll tell you another way the press gets a clue.
Okay.
All right. You may remember, and I'll bring you back
How could I possibly
Doug Shane and Pat Goodell back in 2012.
Yeah.
For the good of the country, Obama should step down and make it one term. He did his job. Just take credit. Get out of here. So you have the Bill Kristols and the Ezra Kleins of the world.
Yeah,
who say, he pulled
back
Biden should step down for the good of the country because reasons. Right?
Yes.
And so it becomes a thing. It's a stupid thing, but it's a thing. So, Klein does a whole podcast about this, and it gets talked about. And then Joe Biden gives his State of the Union speech, and I'll send you the exact article. And then yesterday, Ezra Klein publishes in the New York Times this is the headline: "Fine, call it a comeback."
Okay. All right. Will do.
Right. And then what he writes is, if the Joe Biden who showed up to deliver the State of the Union address last week is the Joe Biden who shows up for the rest of the campaign, you're not going to have any more of those weak-kneed pundits suggesting he's not up to running for re-election. Here's hoping he does. And then for the link for weak-kneed pundits, he links to Ezra Klein.
Oh, yeah, yes. All right, well, a little jab at himself.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I hope this is what Biden does, but Americans feel otherwise. The Times Siena poll, yada, 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 yada. Biden's in a tough spot. Yada, there are actual, real, serious, professional campaign people, not columnists, but campaign people who think Biden's doing fine and he's probably going to win, and he might win big, because that could still break that way. Okay. That's not predicting that Biden's going to win big. It's just that you look at the fundamentals in the setup, and Trump is set up to collapse. And the way he's set up to collapse is that now that Super Tuesday's over, and you have to concentrate on the fact that these guys are really running against each other, and the stupid meme about Biden being old collapsed, and the idea that nobody wants this, given the fact that millions of people voted for each one of these people, is also stupid and a complete construct of the media. I'm not saying that they're beloved. There's plenty of double haters, but it's about 20% of the population, 97% of reporters, and it drives the media and it drives the narrative, and it's simply not true because so many millions of people voted for these guys.
Yes. But yeah, I guess the underlying kernel of truth for others, if you can't get behind the double hater thing, you are at least a single hater, so it's easy for you to understand. There could be such a thing as double haters, or I'm not even thrilled to death about the one I'm voting for. You either hate one, hate the other, or hate both.
Right. Hello, welcome to American politics.
Yeah, I mean, you could always
look at any given State of the Union, any given year.
All right.
That's
I'm
how
not going to do it.
About Obama. Sure, they were more jazzed about him than they are about Biden, that they ever will be about Biden. That's not the point. They're also jazzed about protecting reproductive rights for women, staying away from baby fundie voice stuff, and keeping Trump way the hell away from the White House.
Yep.
So, hello.
I'm for that.
Yeah, but that's boring. I want to write about interesting stuff. Well, get a job.
All right. I mean, I don't want to. But I see what you mean. All right. Well, what else is new? Let's see. Nothing. Okay. That covers it up.
I want to give you some of the headlines that Katie Britt got out of all of this, just to put all of this in perspective.
I mean, I'm just amazed that there are people.
There's just so many. So this is from the pundit roundup.
Vice President.
I know.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Glenn Kessler, Washington Post. Katie Britt's false linkage of a sex trafficking case to Joe Biden. CNBC. Biden rebutter Senator Britt blasted for recycling a 20-year-old sex traffic story to attack border policy. The New Republic. Tuberville tried to defend that State of the Union response. It didn't go to plan. Vanity Fair. Parody level terrible. Even Republicans are panning Katie Britt's creepy-ass F State of the Union response.
F State?
Yeah.
What?
Creepy as F.
Oh, okay. Oh. All right. Gotcha. Yes, that's true.
Creepy as F. State of the Union. Response. CNN, Scarlett Johansson plays Senator Katie Britt in a satire of her SOTU rebuttal on SNL. And, of course, they play that clip. So, that's what penetrates. People didn't have to see it to see this.
That's true.
Chris Hayes has a different clip. I won't make you play it, but it's on Real America's Voice. The right-wing hosts are stunned into silence. I mean, never stop laughing. They have her doing the actual speech, and then they have their faces with their jaws dropping, and it is absolutely hysterical. And, you can't play it on the podcast. It's not going to work, but you should take a look at it later because it's pretty funny.
Now, but that does raise an interesting question. We'll never figure this one out, but I'm now curious at how many Republican men, well, women too, I guess, but how many Republicans who aren't fundamentals, or maybe who even are, but who didn't recognize the baby fundie voice thing and maybe heard that for the first time and were like, what the hell? What's going on here? Because
tons of them, because they're all quoted in these pieces where they basically say this was a disaster for us.
Yeah, I mean,
all right, and then the apologists had to come in later and say, no, it's not a disaster. Nobody watches this. It wasn't that big a deal. You're really making too much of it. Nobody watches the State of the Union. Well, Biden was on drugs. That was the response.
Okay.
Right? He's not senile. He's not drooling. He must have been on drugs.
Oh, yes, that's true. I did see them say that.
Multiple times.
Yeah. Because that's right. Well, as you know, every Republican accusation is a confession.
They said.
Right.
But yes, it is a confession because they got the wrong president.
Mm-hmm. The one who was awash in drugs, the White House was awash in drugs, is the one out there asking to get back. Can I please get back there because that's free drug supply? I used all my money for fines in court, and I can't pay for my own drugs anymore. And I never did anyway, so I'd like you to pay for them. Yeah, well, all right, that'll work great. And, I don't know, it has Mitt Romney saying she should be a vice presidential candidate, so I don't know what to make of that.
Well, it's very hard to know what to make of it.
Of him.
We have at least one senator, probably two, Todd Young for sure, and probably Lisa Murkowski saying that they're not going to vote for Trump.
Okay.
And since Susan Collins endorsed Nikki Haley, it's not really clear what she's going to do. So, there'll be people that are lining up behind him because they feel like they have to, like Mitch McConnell, and then there'll be people that won't, and there'll be people that say stuff in public and do something else in private, and that's one of the reasons why the professionals who talk to these people behind the scenes are not at all sure that Trump, in fact, is ahead or is going to win. Yes, he's ahead in the polls, maybe slightly. Well, who knows? We'll see. The last week or so had the polls tied, but there's a lot more. People aren't doing as much polling as they used to. It just costs too much money, and they know that they're getting dinged for it when they try. And so you're just not seeing as much information, and that's why the people who like to do vibes are filling the void, and that's why you hear so much about, well, here's what I think is happening, as opposed to here's data.
I feel like we hear that all the time. That's punditry.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what I feel like is happening.
And where
my editor feels like it's happening.
There's no penalty for being wrong.
Yeah. Unless it's quoting yourself disparagingly later on. But that's not a penalty either.
Right.
By the way, I was going to say that I've seen some others observe this, and it deserves prominent mention about Katie Britt.
Yes, please.
Is that she told this horrific story about this woman being so terribly exploited, and tried to pin it on everybody. Tried to pin it on Joe Biden, of course, but also tried to pin it on drug cartels, which apparently also was not true. But that lost in all of the fact that she's telling this terrible lie and trying to exploit this woman all over again is that the base reason for bringing the story up is, well, women are being mistreated horribly and being sex trafficked all over Mexico, and I want to keep them there where they can continue to be exploited and sex trafficked. If they manage to escape and try to come to America,
make them stay.
Right. And
turn them back.
All we have to do is, if we can rescue them from sex trafficking, then we can just put them back somewhere else in Mexico, and then they'll never bother the rest of us. Like, the whole thing is that if you manage to escape from sex trafficking hell and escape to another country where they can't get you, Katie Britt says, no, round them up and send them back. Just cry about their story when you do. That's all I'm interested in. And that's fairly amazing that she would go on and think that it would score big-time conservative Republican points to say people are being horribly trafficked, tortured, murdered, and when they try to come to the United States, our answer needs to be, F you, go back.
And
just like I do from my kitchen.
You have to have these two thoughts in your head at the same time.
Yes.
Okay.
And speak like Minnie Mouse.
Our approach is to make sure that they go back.
Sounds like David K. Johnson.
It's Joe Biden's fault.
Yeah, right, exactly. Because, allowing people who have been tortured in other countries to come here is open borders, and we don't like that. Oh my goodness! I mean,
it's just nuts.
I can't go any further without saying that.
But if you keep saying it, you're going to look at me and say, "What's happened to me? How is this happening?"
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, anyway, I needed to get that one in there.
But that's why I think over time it's unsustainable. They may think it's cute and they get a few, lines in. Now, Nancy Mace was on George Stephanopoulos over the weekend. That's why Stephanopoulos made it into the Jimmy Kimmel monologue.
Right.
Okay. And Nancy Mace is defending the wonderful job Katie Britt did. And Stephanopoulos challenged her on it.
Okay.
And said, I don't understand. Basically, what you're saying is, how can you support somebody? How can you support a rapist?
Yes.
And Nancy Mace got really flummoxed by this and then decided to do I am a rape survivor and you're disrespecting me. And Stephanopoulos said, no, that's not what's going on here. This was Donald Trump in court being labeled a rapist. And Nancy Mace's response was classic. It was, well, that was a civil trial, not a criminal trial.
Okay. I'll tell rape victims
as if the fact finding is somehow less important. That, I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand these things. To me, the difference is whether you pay a fine or whether you go to jail. But the facts are the facts, and guilty's guilty. And
you could make an argument, but she didn't.
Record.
Yeah, that it is. That's true. I mean, if you really wanted to parse it, you would point out that the burden of proof is different as between criminal and civil trials for a reason, but there's still a competent court coming to the conclusion that we're going to take action based on this finding because we're pretty sure it's right, just as is the case with a criminal trial, and you're depriving someone of their liberty and you're going to lock them up. You have to come to the conclusion that we're really sure we're right.
A court found this, yes, but it's a civil, not a criminal court. It's still a court, and they still found it.
And, I guess for what she's doing here, I would say, all right, well, look, I'll tell you what. I challenge you to tell rape victims that, the people who were found not necessarily found criminally liable for it because whether statute of limitations had passed or whatever, and you sue them and you win money, I'll tell you, you're not a rape victim because civil, not criminal. And we'll see whether you agree with that one. Let's see if you have the guts to do it.
The whole thing's garbage, And so trying to shift it to, well, you're disrespecting me because I'm a rape victim, therefore I can speak on this and you can't. No, That's not how it works.
No. That is, well, as a matter of fact, I have that I have on somewhere. I know I've got that. There we go.
That is not how this works!
See, I told you it was not how it works. And she was very upset about it, insisted to know. That is not a fundie, baby fundie voice.
The one you just heard?
Yes.
Yeah, that is true.
It's totally different.
Yeah.
I have a story for you.
Good.
I mean, you probably saw this story, but now I'm going to remind you. Did you see that Politico had a profile of Ringwis?
Yes.
Okay.
It was fantastic. We love to talk about Ringwis here.
Yes. And as it turns out, he's a baby, but not necessarily a baby fundie. He's like a 20-year-old British kid. On the show, you've probably heard us mention once or twice at minimum, a Twitter personage, not yet on the other platforms, and I don't know whether he ever would switch, but a parliamentary procedure nut like us. So that's how he kind of has entered into the conversation. And originally I was a little bit confused as between him and KD by proxy.
Yes, KD by proxy, Ira Fleischman.
Yes, because they both
Matt
used
Glassman. I mean, they all talk to each other.
That's true.
That when you wind up looking at something about policy, you see all of this, and then Molly Reynolds will chime in with Josh Hooter, and like these are like the Magnificent Seven,
Yeah.
And so they all talk to each other, and that's where I get all my information that isn't from you, and these are how I get the questions I ask you. Mm-hmm. So Ringwis is like a thing.
Yes, and I confused him at first because KD by proxy is Ira Goldman.
Goldman, sorry.
He they both use Homer Simpson avatars,
Donuts.
And so it was confusing.
They're donut avatars.
Yeah,
actually.
I mean it was the same one. I think maybe it looks like Ira has changed his recently. Maybe probably as a result. But yeah, they both used pretty much the same one. It was very confusing, and they were both procedure nuts. Anyway, this Politico profile is fun. I'll read it to you later on, perhaps. But I wanted to make sure that you saw it.
I did. It was funny. Matt Glassman said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe this. When he's old enough to be able to, I'll buy him a beer."
Well, he's English.
He's not old enough to drink in
can
DC
do it
at this point.
No, but if you go over to London, it'll be fine. Don't know if he'll take you up on it, but I'll tell you though, these kids today, they don't even have to go through 5 years of the press saying that's not how it works, little boy. Before
But the thing is,
famous.
you know, and what they were saying about Ring is, look, this just goes to show that if you really want to pay attention and learn this stuff, you can. You don't have to live it here.
Yes.
But then again, he also has the advantage, and now I understand why he's always comparing it to parliamentary procedure over across the pond, because he knows that too.
Well, that's there. I was going to say, I think the advantage that he has is he's got time to look stuff up because he's a student, and there's large chunks of the day where, you and I can't spend time looking through the congressional record or C-SPAN archives to find examples. But students can. So good, fine, fantastic.
It's wonderful. We could use it.
Yeah, and really though, it was a great example of people just saying, "Look, this isn't magic. It interests me. I can figure it out," and they just do.
Congress matters.
Yeah. You know, we kind of
there was a blog by that name once upon a time.
We used to do that sort of thing. Yeah, and when that gives you the time to do it, you can in fact spend those hours finding those examples and showing these things.
It's a blog that David ran.
For those of you who somehow don't know, because you're only 50, 60 years old and you weren't around in the early days of blogging,
like I was
100 years ago. Yeah. But yeah, that's
Joe
exactly
Biden,
right. And a lot of people said that, I did see a couple of comments saying this reminds me of the old days of blogging, where people who weren't professional practitioners of whatever simply took time somehow or other and made themselves experts in these areas.
Right.
And
Experts,
was able to
but not
inform the rest of
professionals.
us. Yeah.
Difference being we didn't get paid.
Yeah, right. And we still don't. So there you go.
So you're still an expert, but not a professional, because
Right.
you don't get paid.
Yeah. I get tips. I work for tips. That's good.
Well, here's
All right.
a tip for you.
Yeah. A tip for you. Come back Wednesday. That's a good tip.
Yeah.
Can you do it?
Yeah, I can do it.
Okay, excellent. Bring some more video. We'll play it. We'll get YouTube angry with me. They won't take the video down.
Just Google
That's
baby
fine.
fundie voice, because it is a
Yeesh.
thing. I'm just telling you.
No, that's the most amazing thing. I think it's the most relevatory tidbit we've had in quite some time, and will help us decode an awful lot of what's going on. So, thank you. Mickey? Hey kids, welcome back. It's like the Mickey Mouse. It's the Mickey Mouse Fundamentalist Show, everybody. I love the baby fundie voice. It's very much, very reminiscent for me of the Wilhelm scream idea. That once you hear it, you'll never forget it, and every time you hear it again, it will never pass undetected. So that's interesting. So kudos to the video blogger who revealed that to us. Which of these clips is it that reveals what's going on? It's this one here. So Jess Piper tweeted this thing around. I don't know whether that's who made the video or not. I can't tell. Let's see. Jess Piper, Missouri. So there you go. Was she a... Well, here, let me read you the profile here via Twitter. Again, the account is, if you want to go to that stupid place and follow along, because, what else are you going to do? Is if you can't find Jess Piper elsewhere. I'm not certain that you can't, and maybe you can. But executive director of Blue, Missouri. So important, great find also to follow important and impactful activists in red states who are themselves blue, and to support their work. Because, every once in a while we are reminded, as is always the truth, there are blue islands in the red states, and every time we get mad at the craziness going on and say we want to cut them off from the United States like Bugs Bunny, there are millions of blue activists being left behind and abandoned, and we don't want that. Executive director of Blue, Missouri, a rural mom fighting for rural schools, which means fighting against book burners and banners, of course, and host of the Dirt Road Democrat podcast. So how do you like that? You want to follow on TikTok? You can do it. The TikTok ID is down here in the corner, imprinted. Jess Piper, M.O., Missouri. It's all one word, obviously. So there you go. I'm sure she's on other platforms as well. She's got a Substack. It's all there if you want to make a quick visit over to Twitter just to find out where else you can find her. You can follow along. She's, again, Piper4, Missouri, spells it all out on Twitter. Otherwise, jesspiper.substack.com. TikTok is, once again, Jess Piper, M.O. So, varies across platforms. Anyway, one of the most valuable insights certainly of the day, at least the morning anyway. I'm going to give this one, maybe even so far in this electoral cycle. That was very important as far as I'm concerned. Now, on to other things, which include, they've now got a new feature in Pocket. I'm going to have to figure out how it works. Something I've been dying for a long time. They now expanded to the Apple iOS, a highlighting feature, which means, at least technically, it's possible for me to read articles ahead of time, find the important parts, and highlight them rather than read you the whole thing. Although, that's now become the shtick of the show. So, I don't know how long how well that's going to go over. So, let me tell you about Ringwis. Why not? If you know the name or have heard us mention it, then so much the better. And if not, then this is just an illustrative story of the power of social media, whether it be the microblogging format, as they originally called it, of Twitter and the like, or the long-form blogging format that we've returned to via, say, things like Substack, which is reminds me of like the reinvention of home milk delivery. That, you know how that went. Faded out after the 60s, 70s, and then replaced by supermarkets. And then now, of course, get away from the mass marketing. We have, bespoke milk products being delivered direct to your house, except they're not really bespoke. They just like to sell it that way. It's milk. It's nothing bespoke about it. It's just the same milk as everybody else, but in a glass bottle. So there you go. Anyway, look. That wasn't what I came here to tell you about. It was about Ringwis. And the Politico magazine has this piece. And by the way, as I understand it, Gabe Fleischer is the writer on this one. And it should be pointed out that I think I saw someone say on one of the social media platforms that Gabe Fleischer is himself something of a freelance sort of, I guess, neo-blogger, I guess you could call him. He's a writer based in Washington, D.C., is how he's described in the bio in the Politico piece, and the author of the Wake Up to Politics newsletter. So sort of a, quasi amateur, or maybe total amateur at this point, but working for tips like the rest of us himself. So just good all around, good reporting, and I guess really the premise of the piece, in addition to explaining what's going on here about parliamentary procedure and how to learn it, or about the story of someone else who learned it anyway, is that once again, this is something that the political press was very interested in. Ringwis was an anonymous pseudonymous, but otherwise anonymous identity. He wouldn't reveal who he was, and with good reason. Why would you? Why bother? Who cares, really, as long as you're doing good work. But something that lots of the political press was curious about and couldn't uncover. But Gabe Fleischer did, because he was interested and he dedicated the time to it. And you can do these things. So here's the story. Where's the headline? Here we go. The mystery social media account schooling Congress on how to do its job. That's a nice title. Ringwis, an influential X account, because that's what Twitter calls itself now, is changing how the public understands Congress and how members understand their own power, which was really interesting as an approach to describing what he does. And of course made me sad, because kind of that was sort of my thing back in the day, and I guess to some extent still the case. I have one article saying that I do that stuff. From CNN, the article basically trying to track down where did this whole, hey, you can change filibuster rules with a simple majority thing come from. I didn't invent it, though. But who made it a political object and began instructing, essentially, the Senate that you can do this? Me. I did. And along the way, a number of other things that struck me. This headline and subheader really resonated with me because I've been through this a couple of times, whether on the filibuster or other subjects. Immediately coming to mind was a fight over, I don't even know if I can describe it anymore, but years ago when Kent Conrad was chair of the Senate Budget Committee. And I guess what were we trying to set up? A vote on the Affordable Care Act. And when we had to watch Congress go through this convoluted procedure to try to pass it. Do you remember that the House and Senate went through this complicated dance where they were where part of the Affordable Care Act had to be passed through reconciliation? You remember all of this, right? As opposed to passing it all together on the floor, and that there was a fight between Kent Conrad and House Democrats about in the order in which things had to be passed, and that you couldn't remember that the Senate insisted essentially on a certain procedure that was going to preclude the use of some policy portions of the Affordable Care Act. And I think in particular we were talking about this was in the fight over a public option to be included in the Affordable Care Act, and the Senate essentially generally, thanks largely to Joe Lieberman, was dead set against including a public option, and they kind of had to concede that they didn't have enough Democratic votes to get past filibustering the inclusion of a public option. And so therefore, but it had to be done in a certain order such that both Joe Lieberman and, as it turns out, Kent Conrad had to both be satisfied that there would be no public option included, and they insisted that there was procedural reasoning for it. And I found that it was simply, if not the case at all, it was simply a very weak case for Conrad's argument. But essentially it came down to this. The political press said, well, who are we going to believe? Idiot blogger from nowhere or Kent Conrad? Senator Kent effing Conrad, chair of the budget. Surely he knows the procedure better. And it may or may not have been the case. But the real point here is that very frequently I would run into mistakes in procedure being made by senators, but the political press, and I can understand why they do it, came to the conclusion, well, probably the senator knows Senate procedure better than this other person. And I'm sure it served them well as an assumption in other situations, and not always in a situation involving me, and I wasn't a Senate staffer, but that was part of the you can't possibly know. You weren't even a Senate staffer. Well, neither was this guy, but here's the profile. And again, I'll return to that theme of just, sometimes you're just wrong because this happens in this story. But let me start reading the story. So, as Gabe writes it, earlier this year, Matt Glassman, a congressional scholar at Georgetown, who has spent most of his adult life studying the Hill, wanted to know the answer to an obscure procedural question. When was the last time a ruling of the chair was overturned on appeal in the House? He asked on Twitter, tagging an anonymous user named Ringwist. Now, that's a historical question, not a procedural question. We should not really parse that, but it's about the history of procedure, but okay. When was the last time a ruling of the chair was overturned on appeal in the House? Less than a minute later, the mysterious account responded with an answer. 1938. I'm not even sure that's, in the House. It's possible in the House. That's true. I think that's not the answer in the Senate. But anyway, and a decades-old edition of the Congressional Record came along with the answer to prove it. Although, well, I guess I'm parsing too closely. I mean, it certainly proves that it happened in 1938. You wouldn't be able to provide a copy of an edition of the Congressional Record to prove that the chair hadn't been overturned on appeal since then, because that would essentially mean sending the rest of the Congressional Record from 1938 forward and saying, read it, you won't find one. But anyway, that kind of speedy response time and wide-ranging legislative knowledge is what has made Ringwis a go-to source for staffers, lobbyists, and reporters across Washington looking for answers on congressional procedures, especially in a year when lawmakers have been stretching procedures to novel ends and increasingly bucking leadership. That's the new thing, creating a need for deeper understanding of oft-forgotten rules. His tweets have gained renown around the Capitol for their nuanced discussion of arcane congressional rules and history, and for his comfort with correcting longtime lawmakers and Washington journalists alike. His following is only around 4,000, but it's a well-connected bunch, including congressional chiefs of staff, committee staff directors, and other leading insiders. An advantage I did not enjoy on Twitter for most of them. Although a lot of the people mentioned in this article were followers and participants in discussions I participated in as well. But he's really built a more influential, I think, following, even in that 4,000. He's just a complete parliamentary obsessive and savant, really like no one I've ever met, even people in the parliamentarian's office, Glassman told Politico magazine. The catch? Nobody knows who he is. Everyone has their theories. My guess is somebody who worked for one of the leaders for many years, said Martin Paoni, who's been on my list for some time, and who I talked about the nuclear option with extensively, who spent himself 3 decades working in the Senate Democratic cloakroom and now lobbies for Prime Policy Group. It takes a long time to pick up the knowledge that he seems to have. Some suspect a former parliamentarian or maybe a staffer at the Congressional Research Service. One House staffer thinks he must be fueled by AI, almost a chat GPT for the congressional set. I am convinced Ringwis is a ghost of all the previous Senate parliamentarians, and that's why he knows so much. A former Senate aide recently wrote, who was it? Amy Marisol, who I just had, interestingly, a conversation with, including Ringwis, not a couple of weeks ago, that I think we mentioned on the air here, just to digress just a little bit. Do you remember the discussion about defeating the previous question was the topic, and he was pointing out, I don't even remember, but something about how defeating the previous question worked. I'll dig it up, too. And I think it should be fairly easy to find, because I just haven't been participating on Twitter for very long, so that it's probably up there, not that far back. Yeah, there it is. And there's the conversation between Ringwis and Amy Marisol, in which Ringwis writes, and this is back on February 14th, Valentine's Day, writing, the previous question is, quote, an ingenious method, but its technical name does little to elucidate its operation. Do you remember this one? I read it on here. So here's a thread to consolidate everything there is to know about defeating the previous question. The too long didn't read is that this is the best method by which a majority can bring up the supplemental, that we were talking about, trying to bring up the supplemental spending bill that would include Ukraine aid over the objection of the House Republican leadership, right? And then he says, first, a very general explanation. In the modern House of Representatives, the previous question is the motion used to bring the House to a vote on something without further debate and amendment. And he goes on and he writes a fairly lengthy thread about it, but what had caught my eye was Amy Marisol saying, look, I come from the land of unanimous consents. In the upper chamber, there are no rules, just feelings and a few traditions in the absence of precedent. When it comes to the House, it's whatever Ringwis and the magicians at the CRS American Government and Law section say it is. That's all I need to know. And then she at some point says, oh yeah, here we go. This is, she says in response to Ringwiss's thread, this is literal sorcery, Ringwiss. And I had answered at that point, yes and no. At bottom, all it is asking the body, the House or the Senate, as is with the case with everything, what is it that you guys want to do next? And accepting that answer. The real sorcery is getting the membership to regularly cede the authority to leadership to decide that question. But the moving the previous question is just a question of saying, how do we determine what the House is going to be voting on next? It's not just a matter of, like, we teach people, well, technically that's the call of the House Majority Leader. He's the person, he or she is the person in charge of scheduling votes for the House floor. Now that authority comes to them through House conference and caucus rules, and there's a sense in which, at least traditionally, the Speaker of the House has had some control about that because, of course, they wield tremendous power and they work together with the House Majority Leader to make sure that, they're on the same page. It's very rare that the Majority Leader and the Speaker will disagree about what should be scheduled. But that's all basically just saying, well, the reason that the House Majority Leader schedules what's coming up is that the members of the House Majority Party, who can do whatever they want if they hang together as a majority, cede to the House Majority Leader the authority to do that. You make the decisions, and we'll make you the Majority Leader, and we'll keep you the Majority Leader with our votes. But at bottom, it really is asking a majoritarian body, what do you want to vote on next? And since the answer could be anything, they just say, we'll have the House Majority Leader make that decision. And so long as we don't lose confidence in the House Majority Leader and withdraw our support from him and vote to replace him mid-session, then he has that power. But every once in a while, if he does it the wrong way and we really want to go the other way, whether that's as a unified party or with cooperation from some significant number of voters from the other side of the aisle, such that we can put together a working majority for the day and overrule that, then, if we're not in disagreement with where he's going, we'll leave him be. If we are in disagreement with him, then we will defeat the previous question and pose a different question. This is what we'll be voting on instead. And so it's very much like the operation of unanimous consent. So for a Senate staffer to say, I just can't get my head around defeating the previous question because we don't have that in the Senate. Allegedly, they once did, what have you. But anyway, but they purged it from the rules. That's a whole different story. But they say, like, well, we can't understand it. We come from the land of unanimous consent. Well, it's kind of like unanimous consent in the House as well, to say, well, at the very least, we know that the question of shall we get rid of this House Majority Leader and replace him with another one who'll do what we want is going nowhere because party politics will get in the way. But if we don't want to upend the leadership necessarily and replace the people, but we do want to change the question that's pending, yeah, we can do that as a majority, right? And this just is an explanation of how that works. Amy had said I wasn't familiar with what with your game, but Ringwiss is still a wizard and the House is weird. No doubt that that's true, and my answer to her there is I find that it helps make sense of this otherwise stupid sounding motion. The previous question motion and other controls on the scheduling of votes in the House and the Senate. Like, essentially, you got to ask yourself from time to time, who says? That's all this is. It comes down to says who is another way of explaining the previous question or unanimous consent. Says who? Why are we debating this thing? Who says this is the thing that this body should be voting on right now? Some magical wizard speaker? The so-called majority leader? No. The House. We will determine this for ourselves. Sometimes we cede the power to the majority leader as long as his work pleases us. And when it does not, we simply say we do it another way. This is the same thing. Amy protests, I come from the land of unanimous consents. In the upper chamber, there are no rules, right? We're just reading this. Just feelings and a few traditions, blah, 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 and that's all I need to know. No, it's really the same thing. I answered to her. Unanimous consent and motions to proceed, as they use in the Senate, are just different forms of the same validation. Who says this is the pending business? Who says this is the final form of the bill? Some action of the body says so, even if it's just a polite nod toward some sorcerer. But this is the kind of explanation that Ringwis has been so helpful in giving and telling people, when things break down at the margins and they're not operating like they usually do. This is where the big thing here is that people who pay even pretty close attention to procedure view it as a precedential game, in the sense that I've never seen this done before, or I have seen this done once before and you have to do it this way. And very often there are fundamentals that get ignored and aren't explained if you're simply saying, well, this is how it usually goes. Well, what's the underlying rule about how this is supposed to happen? That will tell you the range of what might happen going forward. For instance, if you don't operate that way, you might have thought, for instance, that there is nothing that can be done to change the outcome of the 2020 presidential election at this point. It's all over with, and what they're doing is simply crazy, and they're seizing power. And it was crazy to try to do it, that's true, and to do it the way they tried to do it. But ultimately, if you understand that, like the Supreme Court, as now people are coming to understand, the Supreme Court doesn't really have to rely on precedent. They don't have to rely on anything. As long as you can get 5 votes for whatever the hell it is you want to do, you can do it. Everybody now understands that. Well, as long as you get 51 votes in the Senate, they can do whatever they want. As long as you get 218 votes in the House, they can do whatever they want. They just have to not be embarrassed at doing it. And people don't really grasp that because it's not done that way. But here, just to connect it to the filibuster reform and nuclear option fight. For years, I had to fight my way through saying, look, the Senate can change its filibuster rules by simple majority vote. There are 2 different approaches to how to do it. Several different approaches, probably, to how to do it exactly. But essentially, it comes down to the fact that parliamentary bodies can act to adopt their own rules, even by majority vote. Well, that's not the way it works. Well, that's not the way we've come to think of it working. That's not the way senators have wanted it to work for a very long time. But one of the things about the nuclear option / constitutional option / Harry Reid option, however you want to describe it, was that there were, at the time, finally in 2013 when they did it, there were still senators in the body, in the Senate, who had been there in 1975 when they did change the filibuster rules using this same procedure. And they still pretended that this was not a real thing. It had only been, 35 years since it was last done, and they pretended it didn't happen the last time. And it was one of the most amazing things. And that's where, you have senators saying, no, that's not the way it works. And amateur bloggers saying, but it is. And here is, I did the same thing. I handed out copies of the vote totals, the vote tallies from 1975 congressional record, and highlighted the names of the Democratic senators who had voted to do that and to use that procedure, and we're still in the Senate, and we're in the business of telling people that's not really how it works. If not, why did you do it that way? Biden was there. But by the time this came around, Biden was vice president. Actually, by the time it actually... Okay. So by the time it happened, he was, and still was vice president. But of course, he was in the business then of, taking his instructions from the Obama White House, and Obama was not there, but it would have been an interesting discussion. I don't know whether he remembered that it happened. It was very early on in his career, one of the first couple votes that he was asked to cast. But I don't know. For some reason, the members who were there wanted to forget it, and we were absolutely positively 100% in the same position as Ring was there. Senators saying, no, it doesn't work like that, and me saying, yes, it does work like that, and here's a picture of you doing it. All right, well, I've talked my way up to the break here and comparing myself to him, which is not fair because he's a totally different kind of person and working on a very different level, and he's got lots of baseline knowledge that I don't of the historical precedent. I know how to find it when I need it or find the answer, but he seems to have a lot of these historical answers more or less at his fingertips, although I think it's just good research skills. So we'll tell you more about him because he's a very interesting figure himself, but interestingly kind of came to the knowledge or the understanding in the same way. I was not a long-time Senate or House staffer. I was on a House staff for some time, almost 4 years, but I simply had C-SPAN, or the equivalent to the internal broadcast anyway, on all the time. I just watched them do it. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So, yes, okay, time to get back to the actual story. But I did want to emphasize again that this is, I think, part of a grand tradition of online Netroots denizens. And I don't think Ringweiss counts himself among the progressive Netroots blogosphere types. I mean, he's too young for that, and then he's British as well, so probably not for him. But he'd be welcome, certainly. But it's an interesting thing about self-created subject matter experts. I mean, as others were saying, this reminds me a little bit of Brain Rap, Charles Gaba, just sort of making himself an authority on the Affordable Care Act just because he was interested and spent the time finding the resources and becoming an expert and finding different angles of inquiry into the subject that others were not doing. Marcy Wheeler, absolutely from the same mold. Nate Silver, for that matter, was poblano at Daily Kos for I don't know how long, and as you know, he had to adapt from baseball, sabermetrics, statistical analysis over to polling, with varying degrees of success, you could say, but certainly made a career for himself and changed the way people approached polling. Change the way people approach reporting on the Affordable Care Act. Change the way people approach reporting about Scooter Libby or Donald Trump or any of the other subjects that Marcy Wheeler has taken on. Change the way people think about how the filibuster works and how Senate rules work and the ability to talk to your senator about these things and have them give you a pat answer. That's just not the way it works, and arm you to be able to say that actually is the way it works and you need to give me a better answer than that. That was the heart of the filibuster reform campaign that started with senators and Senate staffers and reporters saying, no, it can't be done that way, and teaching people that it can be done that way, it had been done that way, and that it's not the way it works, that's not the way this works, is no longer an acceptable answer. And when that was widespread enough, voila, that was the way it worked. Holy mackerel. What do you know? And I see it happening again, which is fantastic and usually leads to good things. So let's find out about this guy, Ringwis. Where were we? We had just, stopped in the discussion among Washington types speculating about who it is behind the account. There was one more that says there's an actual parlor game in Capitol Hill among Capitol Hill staff who are trying to figure out who he is. Republican lobbyist Liam Donovan said in an interview, because he must be someone, right? He must be one of theirs, but he's not. In fact, Ringwis has never even stepped foot in the Capitol, much less worked there. The account, which lists its location as Durham, uses Homer Simpson's head as a profile photo and frequently runs circles around veteran congressional experts, and is run by, I think we got the pronunciation is Casper, like the Friendly Ghost, except K-A-C-P-E-R, I'm guessing is a Casper spelling. Casper Surdy, S-U-R-D-Y, in case you want to look him up. I don't know what you'll find on him. 20-year-old economics student at Durham University in England, not Durham, North Carolina. He is revealing his identity here for the first time publicly. Previously, he has seemed to enjoy the Washington parlor game of trying to guess it, retweeting or engaging with those who try. Surdy may live some 5,000 miles from Washington, but he has a favorite Senate presiding officer. It's Cory Booker, by the way, and a favorite House procedure. It is the defeat of the previous question, last seen in 1988. We've certainly spent several years on it here on the show. And prior to our having the radio show, I would say the House procedure I spent the most time on was explaining the motion to recommit. And I think we made some headway in that one in explaining to people and getting people's heads around what the motion to recommit was and why it could be so badly misused. And there were a couple of several rules changes about it over the years. Less as a result of my discussing it, I think, than was the case with the filibuster reform. But I think it certainly contributed to it. There was a real weird, by the way, just to return to that theme of sometimes the members of Congress that you think are experts on it don't really grasp what's going on. There was a period of time in the early 2000s during which the House Democratic leadership had a very wrong idea in its head, to borrow from Moonstruck there, about the motion to recommit and how it could and should be used. And Rahm Emanuel, when a part of the House Democratic leadership, I think had a really wrong concept of it in his head about what it was about and how it could be used politically or by Republicans, and in seeking to duck and cover and not be hit with Republican attacks, very frequently would advocate for allowing Democrats to knuckle under to stupid stunt motions to recommit from the Republican side, and it created huge problems. And it took a lot of work to remind people that, no, this is one of those procedural votes where, it might not satisfy Democrats necessarily to just tell them, listen, you have to shut up and vote this way with the leadership. But if you want a seminar on why it is that you have to treat this as a leadership vote, we can give it to you. But if you want to save some time and get onto some other subjects, just take our word for it. But anyway, now back to the story. It was just a similar thing that maybe longtime listeners might remember from days past in the early 2000s, early to mid 2000s, 2006 or so, which would have been, after the 2006 elections when the Democrats regained control of the House and they had to sort of reestablish themselves as the leadership there. And, that was the period of the height of the abuse of the motion to recommit by minority Republicans at the time. So if you've been around that long and watching us for that long and participating with us at Daily Kos and at Netroots Nation for that long, then you might remember. Anyway, so Ringwist's, though, favorite House procedure, defeat of the previous question. When he gets home from classes, he immediately turns on the live feeds of the House and Senate floors and keeps them on in the background for the rest of the night, which is an interesting thing to do. And, how could he possibly have this knowledge if he's never set foot in the Capitol, where, that's more amazing even than having spent 4 years there and having absorbed this feeling for floor procedure. But the thing is, I spent my days there with it on in the background. You were supposed to. Everybody was supposed to. But they muted it, and I didn't. And that's the difference between the two. Me and every other congressional staffer, that they hated watching C-SPAN. And I didn't love watching it. It was just, and it wasn't C-SPAN. Yeah, again, there's an internal House feed that is turned into C-SPAN when it's piped out for the rest of you. But we've been over those, that fact every time we discuss things like, let's see, before they've adopted a rules package in the House, as they didn't do for the longest time because of the Kevin McCarthy fight, et cetera, and the cameras were controlled by outside operators, and C-SPAN could make different choices about the angles and the use of the cameras, but once the rules were in place, they went back to the old way. Okay. You remember that story? That's all about who controls the cameras, and that's why that's how I learned that there was a feed that looked like C-SPAN but wasn't C-SPAN, but was sort of like a private internal C-SPAN, but without all the commentary. Anyway, when the Senate isn't doing anything, Serdi told Politico magazine, there's a quiet hum that's captured by the microphones, and that's very, very soothing. It's kind of like white noise. It's very relaxing, even when nothing's going on. I guess by way of explanation as to why it's on all the time in his house. Serdi's tweets often take on an educational function, such as his mammoth threads with another anonymous account explaining, step by step, various features of Congress for a general audience. Who's the other account? Maybe I'll click on this and figure out. Oh, it's the Process Party, with whom I am not familiar. But okay, this time talking about executive business and the executive calendar in the Senate. Okay, at any rate, a recent thread on defeating the previous question, which has taken on a fresh importance as Democrats consider using it to try to move a Ukraine aid package, fetched 67,000 views. Another breaking down the parliamentary errors in a recent judicial opinion on House proxy voting was seen by more than 200,000. We should take a look at that one because, that was recently in the news. And, I thought, I didn't even realize that he had addressed that situation. But, I thought there was some weird conclusions, insupportable by the evidence that were reached in that case. His missives are always meticulously backed up by evidence, be they clips unearthed from deep in the C-SPAN archives or highlighted screenshots of Deschler's precedents, an 18-volume House reference book. He often corrects even lawmakers themselves about the rules of their own chambers. Very impressive for a senator, he recently replied to one member's tweet about procedures. Only a few errors. See? It happens. When we think of the best of Twitter, of what it could be, Glassman said, or what it could be, I guess, maybe Glassman said, it's when you find a guy like this, who, as best as I can tell, is sitting in London watching congressional procedure obsessively, when his knowledge can be unleashed to both elite audiences in D.C. and really anybody who wants to understand what's going on. Well, certainly the way I had hoped to be pictured in the days when I was doing that over at Congress Matters, but we didn't have the same reach then via social media. Anyway, Serdi first began following American politics during the 2020 election, which he said many of his friends and peers in the UK paid close attention to as well. A few months later, he watched the 2021 House Speaker's election and became fascinated with the unusual-sounding procedures governing the session. I've been hooked ever since, he said. I always loved that esoterica myself. He first started tweeting in early 2022 and accelerated his posts during the Inflation Reduction Act debates that summer. And of course, at some point thereafter, with the Twitter purchase in 2023, a lot of us made our way out the door. So that was too bad. I'm sorry we didn't have more overlapping time. He caught Donovan's attention during this period when he tweeted about a pair of provisions that had been struck from the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, worth upwards of $45 million that almost no one else had noticed. That was when I was like, holy cow, this guy is special, Donovan said. Donovan, a self-described ringwist evangelist, called him the most encyclopedic authority on the procedure of the United States Congress that he had ever encountered. His audience often surges during moments of peak parliamentary procedure. My following just exploded during the 2023 speaker's election, Surdy says, as larger accounts noticed his detailed accounting of the rules behind the unusually lengthy balloting. Surdy's tweets regularly include references to the British Parliament and other European legislatures. He was born in Poland and has lived in the UK since he was 4, but he says his entry into parliamentary politics was watching the US Congress. Although Surdy says he leans to the left, living across the pond gives him the advantage of watching Congress without feeling a personal stake. That way he can pay attention to procedural machinery without getting bogged down by the policy details that might distract other C-SPAN viewers. When it comes to policy debates, I do tend to favor the Democrats, he said, but I guess it's easier to set those things aside if it's not making a direct impact on your life. Another advantage of his geographic distance, Congress generally gavels in around 10 a.m., perfect timing for Surdy, whose classes are just coming to an end at 3 p.m. in the UK. While discussing his extensive procedural knowledge, Surdy is casual, even nonchalant. He said much of what he knows comes simply from his daily viewing of the House and Senate. Whenever something happens on the floor that he doesn't understand, he leafs through Congress's various rule books until he can make sense of it. Last year, he finished a front-to-back reading of House Practice, which he referred to as a condensed version of House Precedents. The manual is more than 1,000 pages. A pleasure to read, he called it. But despite his modesty, those who interact with Surdy are deeply impressed. He is clearly someone who does their homework, said Michael Thorning, director of structural democracy at the Bipartisan Policy Center, praising Surdy's ability to sift through untapped but publicly available resources to find details others miss. Sarah Binder, a political scientist at George Washington University, called him a procedural flytrap, marveling at the broad expanse and depths of his knowledge and his seemingly unerring memory. Nothing escapes him. He's just a joy to deal with, said former Hill staffer Ira Goldman, who also tweets about congressional procedure using a Homer Simpson profile picture. Both he and Surdy said that was coincidence. It's like having someone in the next cubicle, Goldman said of his frequent online banter with his fellow Homer. Several of Surdy's expert followers said it was rare for procedural specialists to be so steeped in the rules of both the House and Senate and to be able to deploy such detailed comparisons with European parliaments to boot. I could never hope to compete with that. Though I did serve an internship for a member of the European Parliament and the UK Parliament. He's a dual member at that point. But I didn't learn nearly as much, nothing of the procedure at the time. Anyway, none of them, anyway, knew that they were referring to a 20-year-old, another really remarkable part of his profile. It's unlikely Surdy would have gained Washington's attention even a few years ago, when, the occasional nuclear option aside, congressional procedure was a sleepy and largely fixed domain. Although Congress was more fluid in prior decades, Daniel Schumann of the Pop Vox Foundation said in an interview, the House and Senate have largely been stuck in a steady state since the 1980s, as congressional leaders have rapidly accumulated power at the expense of deliberation. And there you go. There's the entirety of the treatment of a decade-long fight over changing filibuster rules and the nuclear option. Nuclear option aside, blah, 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 we never had this discussion. Yeah, we did. Anyway, but Schumann said, something of a rules revolution has begun to brew in Congress lately, with House Republicans ousting their own speaker and defeating several procedural motions, while their Senate counterparts have freelanced on foreign aid and military nominations, bucking Mitch McConnell. Surdy, for one, views many of these developments as welcome changes. His tweets often feature critiques of Congress's centralized power and how it is unquestioningly reported. Yes, and that too, a part of our filibuster reform coverage. The adoption of the mantra, it takes 60 votes, okay. Why did we get to that? Why did we settle on that? That wasn't even the case for much of the career of the people who were saying it, but they now say it anyway because it's a convenient dodge. There was one other thing that I was thinking of as I was reading through this, but now slipping my mind. But I guess, what was it that reminded me of it? All right. Well, we'll see if it comes up again, and next time I'll jump out of the story to spit it out again. I think it was actually around here when we were talking about Sarah Binder. Oh, yes, right. The historical remembrances. There was something else, and I was like, there was something I did like that. I'm jealous of this profile, except I don't really want to participate in an interview at any point. But anyway, I mean, I guess basically that's the true feeling of it. How come we didn't get this kind of attention back in the day? And I think social media has a lot to do with it. And the ability to compare things to European parliaments, certainly, absolutely the case. I was thinking of the, when they mentioned, when Sarah Binder was talking about the historical recollection. One, I think if you're in the United States and involved in politics at this stage of the game and you understand that the Senate can, if it wants to, change its rules by simple majority vote, you know that more or less thanks to work that I did during that time. If you're listening to the podcast, it's pretty obvious because you're listening to me all the time. It makes sense that you would remember it for that reason. But if you're listening to the podcast and you remember, for instance, the second impeachment of Donald Trump, you can't impeach him because he's not president anymore. If you know, oh, yes, you can. There's precedent for impeaching federal officers who have left office already, and it's William Belknap, Secretary of War in the 1870s. If you have any idea or any recollection of that being the case, that's me too. I mean, it was history, so you could have just looked up. Certainly there are people who found it independently, yes, but we made a big, big, big deal out of that. And had done so a long time ago, by the way, in case you were wondering. I think we probably even discussed it in the context of George W. Bush finally leaving office and saying, well, he really should be impeached. And if they ever eventually come around to the historical understanding of just how illegal much of what he did was, they really should turn around and put it on record and impeach George W. Bush after the fact. And why not? It's costless. We don't have to throw him out of office mid-term. We're not changing horses midstream, as they say. We're just simply laying down a historical marker. This kind of behavior isn't acceptable. But, people are interested in looking backward, as we later found out. Anyway, back to the story here. Where did we leave off? The rules revolution, and how interested Surdy is in in all of the changes taking place. Surdy, as we were saying, views many of these developments as welcome changes. His tweets often feature critiques of Congress's centralized power and how it is unquestioningly reported. You can't impeach someone who's out of office. You can't change the rules by simple majority vote in the Senate. Yes, you can. You're wrong. He likes to note that leaders, by the rules alone, are mostly figureheads. That was actually the point of the discussion that I was reading you with Amy and Ringwis before about it's not sorcery. It's actually quite understandable. It's just a question of says who. Anyway, leaders are mostly figureheads. It is only years of members following the pack and choosing not to learn their own power that has made the status quo so rigid. Yes, there you have it. People say, oh, Schumer is bringing up this bill. Johnson's blocking this bill. And that's just not how any of this works, said Surdy. Oh, my favorite phrase. Congressional leaders do not have the power to make decisions about the order of business, what the House debates, how long it debates it for, what amendments you can offer. All those decisions are made by the House and the Senate themselves. If a majority in the House, or a 60-vote, maybe, majority in the Senate, he says 60-vote majority in the Senate wants to do something, they can. I wonder, he must know about, the routine business, of course, yes, 60 votes makes it a lot easier to deal with. But yeah, I assume he knows that you can go around the 60-vote majority necessity in the Senate, although, he came on the scene after that change was made and after that was widely adopted, is true. One example SOTU cited was senators who complain about the chamber going on recess, even though they almost always offer the unanimous consent needed for the Senate to leave town. But it is more comfortable to hide behind and blame leaders, usually the other parties, but increasingly even their own, rather than object. Journalists, he noted, rarely step in with a correction. There's a huge misconception, even among people who work in Congress, that only the majority leader can move to proceed to a piece of legislation in the Senate, SOTU added, but under certain circumstances, any senator can do so, even members of the minority. Senator Roger Marshall, a Republican of Kansas, for example, forced consideration of the House-passed Israel aid bill last November. It's just frustrating to see that members have so much power and they just don't take the initiative, SOTU said. They just defer to leadership all the time. And there's reasons for that, but he's not discussing them at the moment, and he knows what they are. Their constituents have entrusted them with this huge responsibility, and they just leave everything up to their party leaders. And it's because you metaphorically get your legs broken if you buck the party leadership all the time. There's a lot of fundraising you'll miss out on, committee assignments that you'll miss out on, all sorts of opportunities for advancement that you'll miss out on because you're not cooperating with the leadership. Other experts emphasized that political realities often prevent lawmakers, from stepping out of line. Lawmakers have a lot of pressures on how they ultimately decide to vote, Binder said, noting that members are influenced by factors like consistent opinions and leadership pressure, not just their own policy views. And yes, that means the majority can work its will, but if you need to change the rules or break a rule or use or deploy a rule against leadership, even against a weakened leadership, it can be hard, really hard, to get a majority in Congress. There's and the best example of that, by the way, if 300 people say they support a certain policy position, and that bill that embodies it is just not coming to the floor, and you start a discharge petition, how many times have we told you discharge petitions historically, they just don't work. Even though 300 people who are currently members of the House have said, I support XYZ, that doesn't mean they'll support a discharge petition to buck their leadership and bring that to a vote. I support it. I just don't support procedurally preempting my party leadership. Two slightly different questions. There is a collective action problem that arises, Schumann added. Rocking the boat can earn reprisals like loss of committee memberships and precious donor dollars, but such punishments are less effective coming from weak leaders. A group of House Republicans are currently readying a discharge petition for Ukraine aid, showing that not only are far-right members willing to assert the rules for obstructive purposes, but centrist members are now doing so for arguably productive ends as well. We'll see whether they succeed. With Congress passing a historically low level of legislation, Binder said, there's been this sort of unpeeling of the procedural onion here of people looking for solutions. But to force a change, lawmakers must first know the rules. And nearly everyone interviewed for this article agreed that only a handful of them are well versed in the minutia. Interestingly, so far, they said it is Freedom Caucus members who seem the most interested in expanding their procedural knowledge to combat leadership. That's true, but they don't often understand what they're reading. It's not like there's a finishing school for members of Congress, Schumann pointed out. In point of fact, there is one, or at least there was one in my day. It just wasn't widely attended and was more frequently attended by staff than by members, far more frequently attended. And they have like, a beginner, intermediate, and advanced level version of it. I went through the beginner one in the hopes of going through all three of them. But they're very, very rarely given and actually very difficult to secure a spot in. And I wasn't a high enough ranking staffer to secure the spot in the good classes. Anyway, in that vacuum, just to finish up a little bit here, Ringwis, unusually well read on procedure and happy to share his knowledge, has emerged as a helpful narrator, one whose missives are being read at the very highest levels. Donovan recalled a recent meeting inside a congressional leader's office suite when a top staffer surprised him by asking him if he knew the identity of the account owner. He didn't. Staffers in the office had been debating which of their Hill colleagues was behind it. His growing profile is absolutely a function of circumstance and the weird moment in our politics that any of these answers need to be thought about, said Donovan. I'm only sorry now, for the first time, that I'm no longer active on Twitter. All right, time for us to play the music and get out of here. We can conclude the article, so we can at least wrap up one thing for the day here. As long as the weirdness continues, Serti said he'll be there to tweet about it. He said he is unsure what he will do after graduation. Maybe grad school for political science. Ooh, bad idea, but maybe good for you, though. But that has no plan. He's got no plans to stop his Twitter account or to try and monetize it. I do it because it brings me enjoyment, Serti said, and also there's no way to monetize it. And, I think it's nice to help other people at the same time. I agree. I'm with you on that one. We're similar in that respect, although I'm 100 years older than you, and I guess I'm more worried about monetizing things if you can, but I've never found any way to be able to do it. But hopefully you do. This is fun. Fantastic. It was interesting to see the face and hear the voice behind it, and I recommend it to you, except that I don't recommend going back to Twitter to do it. I hope he finds another platform and moves on to that, and we can all enjoy his wisdom and input that way. Time now to hand it over for more wisdom and input to Justice Putnam with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and a brief preview of what he's got on tap for you. If I can just hit the right button. The Supreme Court unanimously ruled that states cannot remove Trump from the ballot without congressional action. However, they did not rule whether he's an insurrectionist, so that's still an open question. And Eileen Cannon letting her incompetence exceed her corruption. Let's find out how after this.
From networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
This too, a development you probably noticed over the weekend. E. Jean Carroll could sue Trump for a third time. Of course, he's out there attacking the judge. That won't help him very much either. Around the world, elsewhere, oh yes, we did not get to this news, but Justice has got something queued up on what's happening in Haiti. We are always ignoring what's happening in poor Haiti. Time to change that.